Kim Hansen, welcome to our Fireside-chat series. How are you today?
Thank you very much. Good. Excellent. Fabulous. Fantastic.
Excellent. Take two, because on our previous attempt, we had a serious bout of rain that caused a lot of power outages that didn't allow us to have the session. Glad you're dry now.
Yeah.
Well, look, really excited to have you on. Particularly excited because, as you know, most of the interviews that we've done so far have really focused on the business value consulting side, value engineering side, and you come from the other side of the sales team, which is the kind of field, boots on the ground sales, value selling capabilities and value selling side. And to get your perspective on value as a whole and the value practice and how you've adopted it is, I think, really, really exciting. But before we start, for the benefit of the audience, it would be great if you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit of background on yourself, where you worked, and what has kind of led you through your career so far.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for being here. It's actually interesting to get the perspective on these things as well. I've done 20 years and 25 years actually in selling, but I normally say 20 years because that's when I was introduced to Medic. And that was like 20 years ago now. I had a company called Essential Software, and it just changed my perspective actually back then. I started out with guys like Jeremy Duggan and Steve McCloskey, who took me through a good school there. And then things basically just evolved from there on. And then we got into IBM again, but then BMC for a number of years, then into Fuse, then into Cyber and then into Sprinkler. And today I'm an independent consultant, actually supporting companies with, basically improving or professionalizing their sales abilities and their go-to-market. And that's everything from coaching individual sales guys to sales leaders to companies who needs to get a process and structure around it and understand the business case around what they're actually doing and so forth. So that's really the journey. And I think the common thing is it's actually been the people more than the companies, because it's been a lot of these companies have been where John McMahon has been involved, Luca Lazaron, Chris Woods, Quartermain, and these guys, Chris Vick as well. So people who has kind of been in that sphere. That has been my magnet, so to speak.
What a journey, right? Because I mean, just those names alone, BMC, Fuse, Sprinkler, from our experience in the space, those are some of the big names in value selling, the ones that really brought that capability, not just Medic, but very scientific approach and data-driven approach and value-driven approach to selling. What an incredible amount of experience, because we hear people that have come from Fuse, people say, yes, that's because a lot of the BMC people went to Fuse. So there's kind of these nodes of best practice value expertise that have then spawned these other nodes across different companies, and then they have that aura about them. I'd love to know from you, where does that aura come from? What is it that was so special about those nodes of value practice that bring about this kind of legendary status to it?
I suspect it's and for me, it made sense in terms of the structure, the process, the commonalities of what we were doing, the language that we were actually able to communicate within. Across what we were doing, there was not. I mean, I always had this idea that you're not just. I mean, very often the sales guys are actually the one that has been put forward as the best guys, right? Those who makes things happen. But I think when you talk about Medic and you talk about how to really drive the capabilities there, it's actually a team effort, because it makes it so much easier to actually collaborate with not just your own manager, because it's clear language when you have a champion or not, right? But it's also the ability to actually collaborate with the business guys, the business consultant guys, the customer success guys, the solution engineers, and so forth. I think that's probably what I think about when I think of this, because nobody is alone in selling, and you need to be able to communicate that in a really fluent language in order to make the most out of it. And I think for me, the magnet across the way that people were communicating these things and the culture. Of course, it was hard, I would say, in the early days, but that just attracted me because suddenly I saw, a science to what we were doing basically, and it was for me that was just very attractive. Maybe because of my brain, how that connected, but for me it was just logic to do it like that. I never turned back. I mean, I have this chip in my neck saying medic, right? But it's really because it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me, and from when it makes sense to me, then it's something that you start living and breathing, and you don't think about it, and
It's
consciously
fascinating
competent.
because in a previous life, in my previous businesses, when I hired for sales teams, I would hear medic. When I would interview sales reps, I would hear medic. And back then, I wasn't in the sales space, right? So medic was a very, very new term, and I would hear it kind of mention, I practice medic. And it, until I actually sat down and actually read through the material, read through the book, several books, but one of the books on medic, it all just connects. It all makes sense. And once you fully understand how medic can be applied, and I'd love your thoughts on it because you mentioned, it's really the real milestone for you early in your career was learning medic, and that's when kind of your sales career really started. There's something about it that is so logical, almost obvious, but you never would have realized it until you actually learned it. That makes you realize there is no better way. Like, this is an obvious route to.
Yeah, and it's the same thing that applies to just about whatever you're doing, right? I mean, like I use it in my private life as well. But yesterday I was out talking to a company where they were doing, a non-technical. This is B2B sales that we tech sales that we have used Medic in for a long time, right? Yesterday I was out with a company who absolutely have no technology involved. They're a logistic company, but I was just trying to see how I could apply it, and you can apply it. I mean, it's actually
totally.
So it's for me, it's just a way of actually thinking, and it's just to break something down to some simple steps, basically.
It's a bit like it's a story, right? It's a formula for a story, and like in films, Joseph Campbell, the monomyth story, the hero story. It's similar thing. You identify a series of challenges. You want to quantify those challenges. What do they represent to that business? How urgent are those challenges? And how you can solve that problem, right? It's a natural course of decision making or problem solving.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's I think that's where the glue comes from. And then I've probably just put my own style to how I'm doing things, because I don't think I'm that American in what I'm doing. I think I'm more Nordic, but still, I have the school in me, and I think that's a strong side. But I definitely see a more modern way of how you can do things as well.
And are there cultural differences in its application? Like, do you see, is it more of a personality or cultural?
It's, yes and no. I think if you look back, it was different times, it was different days than it is now. That's one part of it. But the second part is, who do you actually conduct it towards? Where do you use it, right? And I think there's always been a difference between the American market, the European market, and the Nordic market as well, because you have a lot of, take Sweden, for instance, a lot of consensus-driven decisions are made up there, which is a different way of applying medic to and selling to, right? And selling value to, because if there's 10 people in the decision board, all needs to nod before the top guy nods, right? It's a little bit black and white, but that's how it is a little bit, right? And in UK or Denmark for that sake as well, but US, there can just be one top guy, and he's the one who says yes or no to it, right? And then forget the rest. And you see that occasionally, but you need to. That's a matter of balancing your engagement with the customer that you need to figure out, right?
How do you adapt your sales approach when you've got a consensus-driven approach, a consensus-driven decision, versus a kind of a leader, one-person-driven decision?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a matter of feeling, to be quite honest, because you need to I mean, when we're qualifying an opportunity, I mean, value is one part of it that you always need to make sure you bring to it. But when you qualify the organization and you prepare your discovery and all that stuff, and you know it's a consensus-driven organization, you need to see how many stakeholders, because there will be a lot of stakeholders with different power as well and influence. But you need to be a little bit broader in your approach there than when you do it normally. But I would never say that you should not be broad in what you're doing, because that's really, I mean, have multiple champions is always a really impactful thing to have in sales, because it's, if you lose somebody on the way, then you have another one at least, right? But on the consensus-driven side of things, you really need to have a lot of stakeholders. So you need to have a lot of coffee. We did a fairly large retailer in the last company I was in, and we were not really allowed into the internal side of things. So the champion that we built there, he was actually working really hard on, I think it was like 40 cups of coffee, he said, that he had with different stakeholders in order to gather things, right? But that means that you need to be, you need to really be relational building there, and constantly do value additions to it. And the sales get a little bit longer as well, because they need to cover all these things. But is it different from another one? From a traditional top managed one? Probably not, but you just need to have a different mindset on it as well. And then partners is also very influential, but they will be influential when you do the top driven one as well. So yeah, just, is there a difference? Yes, but I think it's more of a feeling and how you collaborate and how you drive the value to your partner on the other side of the table.
I would presume in the consensus driven one, you would probably need more coaching of your champion to deal with different personas and supporting them. And I'd love your thoughts on do's and don'ts of coaching. Where have you seen the best success in coaching, and what kind of methodology or tooling do you use to support a champion? Because a lot of the time we see that sales is as much buyer enablement as it is selling, because you're trying to help your buyer buy better, because sometimes they may have never bought your category before. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that kind of coaching environment.
I actually think this, maybe it's me, but I think time has also changed a lot in how the professionalism has actually happened there. I think 20 years ago, it was way more hard selling, but still adding the value to it. Now it's a lot more relations, but value adding to it. Because if you come out too hard on your features and functions and stuff like that, you know that you're going to lose the game anyway, right? Because you're not listening. But if you try to put yourself in the shoes of the customer on the other side and actually have an empathy, which I think is way more important now than it was like 20 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just didn't know. But I think that's a different approach to it.
But I love what you said there, which is if you're selling too hard on features and functions, you're not listening. It's that listening that's so important, right? I know you said it as a side comment, but that's so crucial, right?
Yeah. And to be quite honest, I still do errors on these things as well, which is also the interesting part of all of this. I had a situation the other day, which was like, I go into a meeting and I know I should have done it differently afterwards, right? And you just see how you, but that it just makes me human as well, which I actually like about the selling part of selling bits of it, because if you don't, it's so basic basically, but if you don't listen, if you don't really understand what the challenges and the thoughts are on the other side of the table, and you just assume things, then you are losing already, right? And I just kicked myself when I got out of that meeting. But then, as my wife was saying, hey, that's the beauty of it. That gives you the energy, that gives you the drive to improve what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? And but was it annoying? Yes, absolutely.
But of course, I think we're all guilty of that, right? When we know when somebody's speaking to us and we already know the solution, but sometimes they just want to talk, right? Because a lot of time it's a bit cathartic, right? Having this for a buyer in some cases, even for the seller, where they're sharing some of their frustrations, which are linked to the problem that you're trying to solve. And sometimes they just want to get it out, and maybe they can't let it out within their organization for obvious reasons. But maybe having built a relationship with the buyer and the vendor rather, there's almost I wouldn't say called sacred, but a special relationship there where they can kind of vent and agree on something. Sometimes they just want to get up. But I've done that too, right? One of the other interviews I gave, it was also a sales rep. He mentioned that sales, we just want to find the quickest route downhill, right? Because it's all about getting to that sale. But sometimes obviously you need to take a detour exactly.
Yeah.
But we all do it because sometimes you just I've got a solution for you. I've got a solution for you, and it's the excitement that gets in the way.
Yeah, and then we assume things suddenly as well, right? Which is like,
that's the
hey, why are you assuming this? I mean, I'm pointing at myself here, right? Because we should actually, as you said, listen, and of course it requires quite a bit of trust as well for the buyer to actually open up and talk about these things. But once you have that, then there's no stopping for you to actually put the right questions in front of them, right? And get them the most out of it.
And when you do coach your champion, because I think that is such a crucial skill in this process. What do you have an approach or like a 3 key things that you need to coach the champion on? Is there some sort of a methodology that you apply consistently?
I have this thought that I always want to bring value, and it sounds very basic, but how do you actually bring value? And it really depends on who you are engaging with, because each person I could think about 10 different profiles, right? What they perceive as value, right? And I'm just conscious about what is it that makes value to these guys, right? Because there could be, I recall a CISO that I was working with at the time. He had a big fear of losing his job, to be quite honest, right? And I was working with an infrastructure director who was really, really, he had a nickname that was that was really dark. Let's put it like that, right? And he was just known for his ability to cut organizations, but he did it in a human way as well. But he really tailored them to the minimum what's needed and did it very effectively. And I'm pretty sure there was some advancements that was coming along those journey because he became CIO later but it's different things that is driving these guys, right?
Yeah.
And it's different setups that they have of teams that they rely on, which you then need to add value to as well in order to get their nuts. So he will be comfortable about that. And then, so it's really, I think that's the beauty of selling actually. No sale is the same. It's always new situations. It's new values that needs to be brought because it's new companies and it might be that we've done this 20 times or 100 times before, but the customers purchase things every 3 years.
It's as you were talking, it's the 2 P's, politics and personality, right? And those are always dynamic in every organization with every person, right? It's almost like you have to figure out what the personality type of the buyer, that the person, your champion, and what are their motivators, right? The whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What is it driving them and what are the internal politics? And I've been guilty of making a million mistakes of not understanding the right politics within an organization. And you get people who are very, very cooperative, other people who are frankly arrogant, right? But you also don't know what's driving that arrogance. It may be something else being masked. And good salespeople, they navigate that really, really well.
Yeah, and I think for me it's actually has also driven some other things because it's created a bond to those people, which has been like, I think about these people. I mean, my good champions, as I call them, right? I think about these people. Some of them is still on my favorite list. I mean, together with my wife and my kids, right? On my phone, so it's like speed dial, right? And that's really cool to have built up a good relationship because that's trust, and you're not just a sales guy, but you're actually a valuable sales guy, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the time you're advancing their career if you deliver something right, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
they've been tasked to recommend a decision. They're staking their reputation. So once you build that trust, and if you can deliver that value, they they're grateful, right? And you do build that relationship, not just up until the sale, but post sale.
We did a, I mean, one of my, I mean, you have highlights in your career, right? And you do, it doesn't need to be the biggest deal or stuff like that, but there's some significant steps or deals that you make in your career. And this is maybe, what is it like? This was back in the Fuse days. And we had this really fabulous case that we won against Microsoft, which was of course always an interesting one to kick
Of course,
when you are a small player,
when you're
right?
David.
But exactly, yeah. So and I called the so we had a champion there, a guy called Tom, and I called him like maybe 2 months ago, and we just had a good conversation again. And he mentioned that his highlights, because he just went to a conference or internal meeting where they were talking about careers and good things that they'd done. This was one of the things that he had highlighted. And I was like, well, that actually, it actually meant something for me that it also meant something for him, right? And that was, yeah, that's some of the highlights you get, right? But,
Totally.
yeah.
And what
So
has been
he's on my speed dial as well, by the
way. What if you could say what has been the largest deal you've ever closed?
In terms of money or in terms of what I thought was creating the best deal?
Let's do both.
I mean, well, I was part of a $50 million deal back in the days. Wow. This is quite some time ago, actually before my Medic days, which was the largest one. That was an IBM.
Could have even been double if you applied Medic.
I don't think so. I think that was maxed out to the absolute greatest, right? I would have loved to sit so, but I think we actually we pushed it. I think that the best one was I don't want to talk value about it, but that was the one I just referred to, which was with FL Smith in Denmark, because the process there, the collaboration, the way that the champion that we worked together with was, it was really perfect, and the outcome of it was also really good. So it was a challenging case, but it was actually, you had all the facets of what good looks like in there, and that was interesting.
And for you, what is it that you find the most fulfilling out of the sales process, the sales career?
I think that was a total teamwork, first of all. So that was, I think that was the biggest thing of it. I think the second one was, and including with the customer as well, by the way. But it was also where you said David and Goliath, right? We were, in the Nordics, that's a Microsoft country, right? Or Microsoft territory. Everybody runs that. And we basically beat them on their home turf. And I think it came to a surprise for a lot of people. But we constructed it so fantastic. We had all the right, the technical side of things were so well defined. The POC was so defined on the use cases that it was, nearly bulletproof, right? The business case, the internal stakeholders were lined up. And yeah, it just went really, really well.
It's nice when that happens. When all the pieces.
Yeah, it was. And I recall when I know exactly where I stood when they gave me the call that now the contract was signed. I was in.
Isn't that amazing?
It sounds stupid. I was in the bathroom at our house in Sweden back then, and then the call came in, and yes, it's signed. And yeah, and that was just the end of it, right? But it was actually the whole journey from where how we built this to actually landed it. That was just a good process.
That's the mark of an important event when you remember where you were when you learned of that, right? That's remarkable. it's meaningful, right? And look, sales is relationships, teamwork. You said it yourself, right? It's a team sport. And if all the pieces combine together, then it's really fulfilling. And what are some of um, the big errors that you mentioned one earlier? What are some of the errors that you've either made or you've seen that you would consider pitfalls to try to avoid for any sales team?
Well, I think the common one is that we really, as a sales team, we forget the value and we features functions because we have the best thing since sliced bread, right? And that goes for not understanding the use case and you're progressing too speed and too fast, sorry, not really understanding what is the value that you're driving or at least agreeing on it, because once you align on where you should actually focus, then it's a different matter, right? So quite often we have this great idea of what we're doing and how we can impact the business, but we don't get the feedback from the customer. Is that really important for you? So that's one part of it. I think one step further back is when we don't really, when we don't set the agenda the right way, where the agenda has been set for us. We quite often think about it like concrete, right? When the concrete is wet, you can modulate and you can set the terms and the criteria on it. But when it's hard, right? And once you get into that, and that's where quite often the RFPs and the RFIs and whatever of the world is being constructed. When it's wet and you can mold it and you can actually, you can. What is it called when you can mold it, right? Yeah, to your minimum required capabilities. That's where that's one part of it. And quite often we just accept that a company comes to us and say we have all these criteria, and we don't look if they've actually been set by the competition or if they just set out of nowhere because they think this is the way they're doing it, and they've never done it before, right? And I think that's actually the important step. And then you go into, okay, so how do you actually to work the value on these things afterwards? That's the best way to do things, right?
I love that
influence, and then basically support on those things, because that's where you basically, all the discovery is really also in order to qualify in or out how you conducted the engagement from there on. And I'm deliberate saying engagement, not selling, because I think that's actually what matters.
Yeah, for sure. I love the analogy of concrete because I think it just says a lot. If you've been through the experience of receiving RFPs and at different stages of hardening of that concrete, and know what the uphill battle is if it's already hardened.
And it's so hard, including for me as well. I'm not saying that it's just hard for us. I'm actually saying for myself as well, to step away from somebody who's putting an RFP or an RFI in front of you and say, hey, sorry, we don't want to do this, right? But the reality is, if it's created by somebody else, there's a good likelihood that it's not really something for you, right? So why do it? Yeah. And the other thing is, and you would waste and spend a lot of time on it if you can't influence it. And the best cases in that situation is actually to walk out, or at least push back so much that you actually that you've been asked to define, or at least redefine some of the criteria that they're going to take a decision on. Right? But a lot of sales guys, including myself, I've fallen into that trap as well, has actually done that. Just, yeah, we got it. This is a really strategic customer, right? They have this RFI or this RFP, and we get into this and we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and we include all kinds of people from the organization, and we're not thinking. So that step back,
yeah,
and that's where the collaboration with the technical guys, and that I've always valued a lot, is really important, because let's have a look through these criteria. Do they actually match us? Do they actually match our competition there? How can we differentiate?
Yes.
Where have we created value before, right? And that's a little bit down the command of the message as well, right?
Exactly.
Just thinking about these things. Yeah.
And when now in your current role in your consultancy, what are some of the main what is the nature of the services that you provide? Is it kind of in-out consultancy? Is it training? Are you flown in for specific deals to help drive it? But I'd love to learn, because you know from a career in some of the best sales organizations out there, What is it? What are you applying today in some of those organizations?
So it's actually quite a few different things that I'm doing, but medic has kind of been the core of what I'm doing. So I do quite a bit of medic training for organizations, and that goes from sales kickoffs where I've been asked to participate and give some input there, to take sales departments and give them a foundational common language to leverage. And just for the sake of it, medic for me is not just the qualification; it's also how do you do a new business meeting. It's how do you do your pipeline generation, right? So there's a lot of other areas to run that. How do you do your segmentation? So, but quite a bit of it is actually on the medic training, understanding the foundations of it. And I love that journey, because I actually like to see the light bulbs, as I say, go up on these people and say, oh, wow, champion. Damn, that actually, we don't have a champion here, right? Or do we really understand the pain that we are solving in there? So, and what I find very interesting there is actually the metrics, because I think there's a metric to every use case that we are addressing, and a lot of companies. I mean, I always say there needs to be a dollar sign on the use case that we're doing, because else we haven't really understood the depth of what we're working on, right? But those things are really interesting for me to give back on. The other thing is I do quite a bit of coaching to individuals as well. Sales guys who want to up their game, who wants to, because there's also a lot of AI coming in today that shortcuts a lot of the things. And I think they also appreciate actually understanding what was how do you actually do this without having the shortcuts, because then you really understand what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
So that's sales leaders that are in order to help them coach or their team, or to open up new markets as well, is actually also something. Deal coaching, I love that. I mean, I have to say I love selling, and so the deal coaching is actually really important for me as well, a part of it.
Will you get brought in when a company has a very large deal and they want to bring in some heavy hitter, so to speak, to help guide and coach the reps to make sure that they're at their optimum level?
I would love to do. I haven't actually had that, but it's more been the other way around, where I came in and then we were doing the fundamentals, making sure that there was a good basis understanding. And then when the question comes to, okay, so how does your forecast actually look like, right? After we've talked about, and I normally just talk MIC, because that's the core of do we have opportunities here or not, right? And when we then start looking at the forecasts and dismantle it a little bit, you really figure out where do you have the deals. But then the really funny thing is, when you do this, is when you can upsell the deals, right? I had one of the companies that got me into this was a small Danish biotech company, but they have a really brilliant product, and it's such a wonderful business case with the product, right? And they were selling these boxes, capabilities, hardware, software solutions for, I think it was 25K. But then we turned it around and said, well, that's great that you have this capability, but that's not really the problem. You need to look at what is the challenge for the customer that you're selling this to. And we found out it was a $300 million problem, is that right? for some of the customers that they were addressing. So you can imagine what it didn't mean that the sales price went up for them, but the quantities and the amount of the challenges that they were dealing with was suddenly increased, and the people in the organization was suddenly different as well. Because if you are addressing a $300 million problem instead of a $100,000 problem, right? It's different people in the organization, and that transformation was actually something and I actually brought in. I got some help from Dave Conrad actually to help me because I worked with him a number of times, and I got some help from him to formulate a little bit on how we structured the actual business calculator for this. And it was fun to connect back with him, by the way, to do this work. But yeah,
but
that's what I really like, to go in and turn the thought process around on how do we actually sell things, and where is the value actually connected? Because when you look at value, you look at, quite often we look at what is the invoice that we're going to sell send to the customer, right? 100,000, a million, whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? But what matters is actually how big is the challenge? How big is the problem we're solving for the customer? How can we actually impact that, right? Because we've done it, and they reduce it by 80% of the time. That's a big impact.
Absolutely.
And suddenly, I have this when we talk about metrics and prices when I do training. I always say that if you put a price tag on a contract in front of a customer and you say this cost you $1 million, that sounds really expensive, right? But if I tell you that it's going to drive 10 million in cost savings or revenue increase or whatever, who cares about that $1 million, right?
Exactly. That's value in a nutshell, right? I mean,
that's
and you mentioned it
nutshell,
yourself, that concept of uncovering 300 million in value. That's the driver of value, right? Of the process of Medic. How do you uncover not just problems, but value that can be created for that organization, right? Value selling isn't about extracting as much money from a buyer. It's about creating as much value for them and equally sharing in that value, a portion of that, as part of being the vendor for that.
And the great thing here is then we're back to some of the conceptual things like 3 whys and so forth. This actually drives why now, right? Because suddenly you can actually go in and say, okay, that's great. If you don't do this today, then it will cost. I mean, the cost avoidance here, because quite often we meet this. I don't need this, right? But that's because we don't have any answers to objections. I mean, a way of handling that objection, because we don't know the value of it, right? But once you understand the value of doing nothing, then you can, that's fine that you don't want to do this, but if you wait another month, this will cost you X.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, wow, okay, then you create the urgency, right?
It's battling indecision, right? We say that a lot. So many deals, 60% of deals are lost to indecision. And that's because the business case hasn't been sufficiently clearly in a compelling enough way communicated across the organization that why now is so crucial. Yeah. I know we're coming on time, but I did want to ask you a couple more questions, if you don't mind. The first one, coming from the sales side, is who within the whole partnership of sales and value consulting, who has been the best value consultant you've worked with?
The best value consultant? Wow. So I have a little bit of history, right? And some of the guys I just mentioned Dave, because Dave Conrad, I've worked with a number of times. Matthew Wells has also been a good guy for me.
Both legendary.
And Tor Bruno as well. I don't know if you are familiar with him, but Tor has worked quite close with him in BMC.
A compatriot of yours, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Which is a little bit uncommon for Danes, because a lot of the guys are international, right? No, but I think I still cherish these guys, because back in the days when we started out on this, BVAs was something I did. I mean, I've done, I don't know, 20 BVAs, but the biggest one has been together with guys like Dave or Matt or whoever, right? And that has, and Tor as well, for that sake. So now it's actually, I mean, now these guys or these capabilities are more known, so they are more spoken for. So when you go look into organizations, they're like, it's so hard to get the time, the bandwidth, and the true engagement from them, right? So that's really, for me, they stand out as part of the team that you need to have if you're doing some big, wonderful things.
And you hear it, they also have a really articulate way to communicate value and how it should be delivered, that becomes quite educational within an organization. So I can see why they're in such high demand. And from within your peer set, any or mentors in the sales space, any people that come to mind of the best that you worked with?
I mean, it's sales guys, yeah, so and sales leaders. Wow. Yeah, a lot. I mean, back in the days, I really, I mean, I was very, I mean, Steve McCloskey, Paul Tant, these guys right back in the days. But I would say later years, actually, one of the guys that I worked with in Sprinkler, I actually started up with him as a first man on the ground, a guy called Kenneth Paulak. He actually, he was not so skilled in these capabilities, but he actually was, his coachability and his technical understanding and his ability to build champions was actually really, really great. Or is great. He still is. So that stood out. But I think there's been so many, I mean, sales guys, I love working with guys like Chris Vick and Adam Quartermain and there's so many sales guys that is really good. I mean, I've always been looking a lot to the UK side for inspiration. So whenever I've been in the Nordics, right, and I've started up with it here like 4 times, I think. I mean, first man on the ground, but I've always connected myself to the UK part of the business because a lot of momentum and inspiration and drive came out from there. And there's been so many sales guys over the years from, I mean, in the BMC days and the Fuse days and the Emma as well, by the way, Emma Martin,
sure.
Who I actually collaborate with today. Huge, I mean, really good as well. But I always look for inspiration there because they drive value.
Culturally, the UK is very strong just from a valuing sales as a first job career, like to build foundations. I think, there's very, very few other jobs out there that can give you the foundation of interpersonal relation skills, business acumen, understanding, connecting the dots, right? And that is a foundational layer for any grad, I think, can only help you in any walk of life, right? Because sales can be applied, like you said, in any relationship, professional or even at home. That's a whole other story. Kim, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. This was a fantastic chat. Look forward to hearing more about it on the next one.
Yeah, you're welcome. And likewise, absolutely. It's always fun, but value is important
100%.
in any aspects of life.
Thanks, Kim.